So welcome to Origin Stories. I'm Robert Ty, and my guest this week is Aaron Carter from Total Sport. Very welcome, Aaron. How you doing?
Yeah, doing great, thanks. How are you going?
Cool. I'm good. I'm good. Where in the world am I talking to you from? Where are you zooming from?
Um, I'm in my office, and we live in Taupo these
Yeah.
days. So a couple of years ago, we kind of split the business and we made a bit of a lifestyle move down here, and then kind of built up a team down here and stuff. So we got half the crew in Auckland now, and half of us are down here.
Pretty good part of the world to build a Total Sport outdoor event business, right?
Yeah. It wasn't but it wasn't at all the primary reason for moving. It was very much kind of lifestyle and trying to work out how to exit Auckland. But I think one of the positive byproducts was definitely this area, this region's pretty massive for the kind of things we do. So there's been some advantages for sure.
Very, very good. Before we get into it, I should tell people a little bit about you. You sent me an email last week that read, "I've only ever had one career, and that's in sports event management to be specific. I started my career at Sport Auckland, where I was employed as an event manager, and my job was to deliver a portfolio of events. I spent 2.5 years at Sport Auckland, and that was a great apprenticeship in sports event management. In 2000, I wandered into my boss's office and convinced him to make my position redundant, and thus Total Sport was born. Nearly 20 years on, Total Sport is one of New Zealand's largest and well known sports event companies. Um, so I suppose I want to ask you about the some of the key turning points and decisions over those years that led to Total Sport. From going through this process with people, there seems to be kind of two, three, four kind of key kind of moments that kind of influenced everything that followed. For most people, that starts with family or school or both. So I suppose the first question, in terms of what you do now with Total Sport, what was it, family or school or both that got you interested in sport?
I think yeah. So I guess the origin was for me was sport. I went to a boys' boarding school, and so just based around the nature of that, it was kind of modeled that we got a lot of outdoor time, and I was, you know, like most, probably like a lot of Kiwi boys and girls, really keen to get out and about. The school stuff was, okay, but I'd much rather be out there kicking around with my mates. And so, and I was pretty good at sport too. So I was, most of the things that I did, I was okay at. We'll actually get to that probably later. The things that I'm useless at are the things that I love the most now, which are trail running and things like that. But I was, played a lot of cricket and soccer and rugby and that kind of thing. But there was always a really strong foundation for being outside and playing sport. In those days, very much kind of team-based participation sports with a
Cool. So what level did you get to? Did you ever have dreams of playing full time in any of those sports, Aaron?
I I did, I'm not sure whether I've necessarily got regrets about this. I was a good cricketer,
Yeah.
um, and I went to a school that. Then I'm not making excuses here at all, but I went to a school that wasn't really geared to look after talented sports people. Like it was pretty much you were kind of doing it on your own, and I was a bit lazy, so I was a classic, sort of reasonably talented sports person who A wasn't really taught and B didn't have the internal drive to kind of take it to the next level. So I played a pretty decent level of cricket. Went straight from school into sort of the top senior men's grade, which was a hell of a eye opener for me. Playing at 17 with three or four present kind of what we call black caps. The
Right.
whole the whole structure around cricket back then was different.
Okay.
You'd have people, guys like Danny Morrison, who was opening the bowling and for New Zealand in those days, playing in the team that I was playing in, and I was just petrified. I was too scared to chat to any of these guys. It was a real it was a real kind of interesting experience. So I played a little bit of rep cricket, but yeah, didn't go too much further, and played with guys who represented represented New Zealand and stuff, and
Do you want to name some
so
names? Can you name any names?
The guy that him and I were kind of sort of heading side by side doing kind of similar things. A guy called Richard Jones who played, he was an amazing cricketer. Played not a huge amount. Played a couple of tests and various other games for New Zealand. And as I said, sort of played alongside guys like Richard Reid, who captained New Zealand,
Hmm.
Danny Morrison, and all sorts of people.
Cool.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Cool. So
Yeah.
when you first started thinking, I suppose, about a career or a job after school, what were you thinking? What was in your head? What was your dream job?
Definitely sport.
Hmm.
Definitely wanted to be involved in sport and recreation. And then the other major influencer was my mother, who was involved in events,
Right.
not sport. Like she was my biggest fan, and would sit there watching me play cricket. But I would go from morning cricket at school to senior cricket in the afternoon, and she would kind of just hang out the whole day.
Yeah.
Remarkable. And she was involved in primarily conference type event management. So
Sure.
it's probably not that big a surprise that I sort of kind of those sort of two things came together.
Yeah.
And she was an influencer in the early part of total sport, and unfortunately she passed away way too early at the ripe young age of 50,
Oh wow.
and lost a battle with cancer, which started
Right.
in her mid 30s.
Wow.
Um, and if we get more to the the business side of things later, then yeah, I can share a little more around her kind of advice to me, which I very much ignored in the early days.
What,
Um,
what was her advice? What was her advice that you ignored?
well, it was like, I guess if we sort of go back to the early days of total sport, where it was me
Hmm.
doing kind of everything. Every kind of aspect and facet of the job, putting on events, I was kind of leading, which is fascinating now that I look around the business now, and I do virtually none of that stuff. But you know, I'm not sure if I mentioned in that document I sent through, but the book, the book in me is probably around how not to start a business.
Right.
And so I did very, very little planning, financial or otherwise. And she also came from an accounts sort of finance background. So
Yeah.
we had quite a few conversations in probably those first 2, 3, 4 years around I guess the potential sustainability of this little business called Total Sport that I kind of conjured up from from nothing. But I guess I was reasonably stubborn. I was pretty determined, and yeah, in a polite way, kind of thanked her for her advice and just carried on doing what I was doing anyway.
So to rewind to your Sport Auckland days, for somebody who had no idea about financial planning or how to run a business or any of that stuff, what prompted you to go out on your own? What do you remember the moment that you decided, hey, why not? Or was it considered?
Yeah, it was. It was. It's probably the way in which I do a bit of my thinking and come to some of my decisions. When I reflect back, I got, I just got this feeling that I wanted to do something for myself. Like I think the big driver was starting a business,
Yeah.
and it was never about needing to be the boss. Like I'm a very reluctant kind of boss anyway, and kind of
Hmm.
always have been, and much prefer kind of being in the shadows. But that was the thing. I was like, right, I'm in this job that's giving me a really good grounding around how to do this stuff. I like events. I love the bringing the people together, to put these things on, and I love sport, and and I want to do something for myself.
Hmm.
I feel like I'd get great satisfaction from starting a business. So it was really a combination of those three things, and then the timing, as you sort of mentioned earlier. That organisation that I was working for, really great, but always, really struggling financially,
Right.
and I could just see this opportunity where I'd been there for long enough and had a pretty good understanding around the events that they would like to continue. So that sort of became my pitch to my boss. Was, hey, I'll deliver these. There was three events that they were really keen to continue.
Yeah.
Um, so that was a pitch that that one, got a contract for 20 grand, which seemed like such a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
So I left that job with this guaranteed kind of contract of 20 grand. And then from there, we we struggled along for a few years before we started getting a bit clearer. I say we, it was me, before I started actually getting a bit clearer around what total sport might be.
What were the big challenges? What were the major hurdles you had to overcome?
Um, the dollars, the finance thing was always tricky.
Mm.
However, they were actually kind of golden days too, because I had no real responsibilities. Like I wasn't married or partnered with kids, so I didn't need a salary. I was taking drawings when required to pay, things like rent and stuff. Um, so it was all like, again, I wouldn't recommend to people that they go that way.
Yeah.
But it was really just driven along by this keenness just to kind of create something really,
Yeah.
and it all kind of came from there. And then we got to a point where I was still playing cricket, and then I sort of got this inkling around these running events mostly. I was really attracted to the outdoors, but not the roads so much, more kind of locations, forests and coastlines. And then the first event that we still going, an event called the Coastal Challenge, which is, probably my sentimental favorite, I think, if I had to put that on record. It was just basically this really simple concept about getting people to run down the North Shore coastline, which seemed like such a cool thing to do. And the fact that you could do that with no interaction on roads, not that there was any, traffic management wasn't a thing back then, but just the idea of getting people, off the beaten track and into doing these cool things. And then once we did that, like that event started, it'll be the 19th year next year. It started with nearly 600 people, which is a lot of people back then. And I was like, wow, people are prepared to pay to do that. And then from there, incrementally, I started to get a lot clearer around the strategic direction of the business and the purpose. And it all started kind of distilling itself, but it was very much a work in progress. And, from Coastal, we then started looking at other concepts, like getting people into the Waitakaris and, running on trails there and on all sorts of things, to the point where, we started getting, a part-timer, then a staff member, then one or two more. And it all just kind of, snowballed, but kind of a little bit in slow motion. I think had I had that plan, it would have been a lot clearer. We would have probably got to places a lot quicker than we did.
It obviously the timing was really important as well, because it coincided with a rise in the popularity of trail running, and I suppose outdoor events, not just in New Zealand, but I would suggest around the world, right?
For sure. Like we've had some luck, and probably the single biggest piece of luck that I had was that New Zealand was kind of ready to embrace this kind of outdoor recreation as a legitimate kind of option. And again, I really hadn't done the diligence or the research around that. It was kind of based a little bit selfishly around the things that I liked. So I kind of replaced cricket and all these structured team sports with these things that were still really awesome, but I was able to do on my own time. So I think, and I get this story quite a lot from people, particularly those that are in their, sort of my age bracket, 40s, 50s, where you go through the process of career and family. And if you were playing structured team sport, it generally oftentimes falls by the wayside because you're dealing with these other things.
Yeah.
And one day, you look down, you can't see your feet, and it's like, whoa, it's time to get the shoes on and, maybe start by going for a walk. And then, the journeys that we see some of these people take from, literally not being able to see their feet when they go for a pee to, doing marathons and ultras. It's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. I think my first experience of a total sport event was back, I think it was 2010. I went out to an event at Shakespeare Regional Park, and it was I think it might have been just after the first Christchurch earthquake. I met a baker from Tip Top Bakery in Otahu who had been woken that morning with a phone call about the earthquake down in Christchurch, and he was the operations manager or something in the factory, and he had to organise to bake an extra 30,000 loaves of bread to send down to Christchurch because the tip top factory was shut. In between doing that, he managed to race out to Shakespeare and do your event. And I managed to grab him at the finish line and ask him, you know, why did you make such an effort to get here? And he said, well, it's the event and the location that makes it so special. It's an escape for me from the stresses of work. And this guy was a big unit, and he said I sometimes feel like a Saint Bernard amongst greyhounds, but he said Total Sport have a great way of making everybody feel like a champion at the end of the event, and that for me kind of sums up Total Sport and the outdoor events that you guys run, right? Okay, it's very much about making everybody feel included and feel like a champion.
Yeah, that guy I think is Gerald Taylor. I think the guy that you're
Correct.
chatting about.
Correct.
Is that right? Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
You know, and that guy remains like he's one of hundreds of people who tell you know that sort of a story. I was had goosebumps while you were telling that, by the way, because it's still the thing for me. And as the company has grown, it's become so much more than the fact that people go and do these cool events. It's what these events and what being able to create that platform people gives people. Now, that guy remains one of our biggest fans. I probably haven't seen him in nearly 10 years because he moved to Australia not long after that.
Right. Okay.
He still pops up. He still shares our posts. He sends me the odd note, you know, just telling me, reconfirming how, you know, how much he loves this kind of stuff, even though he hasn't been back here for a long, long time.
Yeah.
But Total Sport is for people like that. I like the what do he call himself? Something among greyhounds.
A Saint Bernard, a big Saint Bernard dog against greyhounds. But you know, he talked to me. The other thing that he got out of it was, you know, when he went into work on a Monday morning and people asked him what he did at the weekend, instead of saying he, you know, sat in front of the TV and I went to a game, he was able to say, you know, I ran 20 kilometers along the coast and up and down these hills and through some mud. And people looked at him like he was crazy, but he just got such a sense of, you know, satisfaction about being able to kind of obviously go through it and then share the experience with his workmates, which is cool, right?
It is, and it's infectious too. Like we've seen, I mean, you see, we've been going just over 20 years now, so you see these kind of cycles in this kind of industry that we're in kind of come and go, and it's really cool too that there's people having that conversation now with their peers who have also been out there doing those events with them. So this whole kind of collective organizational kind of buy into these sorts of events has been really growing again the last few years, because it's such a easy, cheap way to to get your people connecting in a non-work environment, and the positive spin-offs for that stuff are immense too, man. Like we've got, compared to several years ago, we've got so many of these groups now that come out as work groups and they become mates on the trails. That's wicked. That's really awesome, eh?
We've dovetailed into a chat about running, but that's fine because I'm obviously a runner now as well. Since that event, that first event I went to as a journalist and a writer, I was converted. But it seems to me, I mean, again, does that happen by chance that you create that kind of a culture where it's all inclusive and all encouraging, or is it something that is shared, with trail running events around the world? Would you say?
I think a bit of both. So if we kind of fast forward the Total Sport journey just a few years, I did actually get really clear around the purpose of the business, and there were some really key bits, and they're very much the foundations of the business that I was really attracted to in trying to create something. And that, you mentioned it already, that word inclusive was always a massive one. Like these events are about providing a space, a space where people feel welcome and not threatened, to bring people together, to like-minded people together. Whether someone's doing their first 5K walk or someone is knocking out their 75th marathon, the challenge, which I feel like we usually do pretty well, is bringing all those people together in this common place and creating a place where those two people can have conversations. I think trail runners, more than any I've seen, and there's a whole different bunch of sectors, and we categorize them all, and they are all a bit different. But I believe that trail runners are the most welcoming, are the most down to earth. They're the kind of ones that have, for me, have got the best characters out there, and that they are really welcoming by nature. So you hear, and again, we're so privileged to be in this game, because you get exposed to these amazing stories around the journeys that people take, but also the classic, and often it's a female who's feels threatened to go, it just feels like it's a step too far to go and do one of these events. And she gets coerced by her mates, and she goes there and she's freaking out and she doesn't know what to expect. Exeter is a classic, the series,
Yeah.
the trail run series. So she might go to the first one, and then you watch this transition through the series. By the end of it, she's made new friends. Like she's got this gang now that she hangs out with.
Yeah.
The confidence to be able to run 5, 10, 20 Ks is there, wearing the gear. Like, it becomes this place. It's like Fight Club. It's this thing that people crack into and they latch onto. But it's that spot for them. This big escape thing is pretty important, I think, because again, a lot of people that we chat to, and like Gerald's a classic. A lot of high pressure jobs that these people are doing, and I think they come to us to kind of provide some of that kind of escape for them in their downtime. It's a responsibility that we take really seriously.
Yeah, the other thing I think that stands apart for me for comparing trail running, say, to road running or road cycling, which is very obsessed with numbers and beating your personal best and Strava. And I know that goes on in trail running too, but because of the nature of the courses, and 1 20K event might take you, a regular runner, 2 hours. Another 20K event might take them 4 hours. You just cannot pace yourself to the same extent. So as a result, you tend to, I think, just appreciate the journey more and run for the sake of running, rather than kind of constantly checking your watch and making sure you're hitting your splits, right? I mean, my wife came to the end of a trail marathon that I did last year, and she worked as a physio previously at road marathons. And she said the difference between people crossing the finish line of a trail marathon compared to people crossing the finish line of a road marathon was just chalk and cheese, because at the end of a road marathon, people are spent. They go through that wall because they've heard about the wall, they know about it. At a trail event, it's not to the same extent. And again, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, I think you're bang on. Like, and again, you have the conversation with the people, and often, the roadie, we call them roadies that turn up and find us for whatever reason. Maybe their body's falling to bits, and they hit the trails, and in their mind, they're doing a 1:40 half marathon or a 2 hour or whatever, and then and then they meet us at the Speight's West Coaster, at Bethel's Beach, and they sometimes have this expectation that they're going to do a time that may be a little bit more than that, but not much.
Sure.
And the one thing we really try to do is match expectations with these people. Like, if you get the opportunity to chat to that person, it's like, hey, be prepared that you might double your time here. And sometimes they get it and sometimes they don't. But those who get it, I think they would sort of share the common views around those events, that they're generally harder than road events in terms of the terrain and the different kind of the different types of terrain that you might encounter in these events. But it's the vista, it's the nature thing, like the being outdoors and not on these these roads, and it might hurt more, but the journey is a lot more enjoyable for all of those reasons, and probably harder too, which I think gives these people this heightened sense of accomplishment as well, because there's something kind of pretty cool about knocking out a half marathon, like a really tough half marathon that takes 3 to 4 hours. Like man, that was tough.
Totally.
But and different just by nature. Those and we love them. These good runners who knock out these crazy times. Total respect to them, but total sport is not and was never created for them. It was created for the other people that are just kind of trying to get into the sport, wanting to find this kind of happy place.
Yeah, very good. We should get back to the business side of things. You mentioned obviously starting out, you were winging it. Was there, again, a decisive moment or a turning point or a mentor or somebody who kind of put you on the right track or I suppose even a point when you realized, actually, I'm getting good at this?
Um, yeah, I mean, I remember having a business mentor, which kind of one of those ones you kind of Google business mentors and they pop
Yeah,
up. And I kind of had for a couple of years a guy that helped me out with some pretty basic stuff. But in real, like I really kind of did it by myself. It got to a point probably about 10 years ago where because it's kind of a lonely job, particularly
mm,
when you're making decisions and because you haven't really been in that position before, you're not necessarily sure whether you're making the right decisions. I started to go looking for people because I did kind of work out where my weaknesses were, and there was kind of plenty of them. And one that recurring one is probably financial, where I was making decisions and maybe not balancing quite as I should have been the kind of the business plan with the potential financial ramifications. So I actually went seeking some people to kind of try and get on board, and I ended up making the decision to kind of create this board, which we still have now. There's three guys on there plus me, and I ended up selling them a small share of the business. It wasn't necessarily that was the plan to do it. Just as the conversations kind of transpired was a real way to get these guys fully invested. Um, so yeah, that whole kind of finding people, mentors to chat to that did become important, but probably not till not it's probably been the last 10 years or so that has happened. Prior to that, there was a lot of trusting your gut, starting to get a feel for the organisation. Then the research around other events and
sure.
and making calls around the sort of stuff that we thought we could do. And once we got clear on the purpose, all of those decisions became a whole lot easier. Like if the company is about creating great events and stunning locations whereby you're bringing like-minded people together to create this non-threatening inclusive experience, all of a sudden when you get that sort of definition, it's quite easy to make decisions.
Sure.
The first few years, not so much.
Okay, very good. How many people would you, or do you have the number, have been through or participated in total sport events over the years? Any ideas?
Yeah, I did do this number recently for in a presentation that I did, and I think I'd worked out that we had produced somewhere between it was 300 to 350 events,
Mm,
and it was kind of like around 500,000, I think,
wow.
people had done the events.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so kind of, reasonably impactful.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, and as you said, I mean, because it does change people's lives and the way what they do with themselves at weekends, and if you commit to one of these events, I find the emotion at the finish line is it's pretty high because you've committed to it for 6 months or 3 months or whatever it takes, and it's yeah, very impactful, I would say. This time last year, Aaron, I'm guessing you were flying high. I mean, I think Total Sport was in, probably a really good position, right? And looking forward to 2020. I'm wary of going there because I know what a tough year it's been for your industry in particular. But yeah, tell me about, this time last year and how things have changed for you.
Yeah, okay. I'll just take it back a couple of years just
Yeah,
to kind of paint a picture because it might be even a better story.
yeah,
But going back into 2017, 2018, we had a couple of really tough years.
okay,
So, I continue to get some things right and then a whole bunch of things wrong as well. And 2017 and 2018, we ended up losing quite a bit of money through, but mostly, not all, but mostly due to an event that I thought was going to be the next big thing and wasn't.
okay,
And one of my learnings out of that one, just as a side note, was that my team weren't into it. It was a big road-based marathon. It kind of deviated from the purpose.
Okay.
But I saw this opportunity. I had relationships and got funding to put this event on, and thought it was going to be the next Auckland Marathon, and it wasn't.
Okay.
So we felt some financial hardship through that event, and then 2019. So we were having a bit of a down patch. I mean, our books look like your average marathon. They go like, if you
Okay.
saw the balance sheet, it's been peaks and troughs the whole way through. 2019, we got rid of this event, sold it to someone who did a far better job with it than we could have, and we had a booming year. Like, all of our numbers were up. Was our record. So in terms of participants, our biggest year ever, the total amount of participants that did the events. And we're like, whoa, that was great. We just felt like we had the portfolio perfect. We had the people doing the right things. The total sort of Auckland office dynamic was going really well. Just felt good. Everyone was just doing what they should be doing, and everyone was bringing with it this high level of passion, which we're really fortunate in this business that you get these sorts of people.
Yeah.
And then 2020 started. We're like, we've got a great platform. We're back in the black. And we started off well. So, I track the numbers really closely, because that's really important.
Sure.
And I know that now. But 2020 started, we were reasonably significantly ahead of 2019. So we were really, really heading into a really great year. And it also happened to be the year that I was like, right, we're heading for 20 years. So I had started to put in place my exit strategy, which is part of, a reasonably interesting, significant part of the journey and the story as well. And then March 16, man, I spent my whole day on the phone. I was at my nephew's birthday party at Rainbow's End, and I spent my whole day wandering around as COVID became a real thing. And we, the next day, cancelled the first of 7 events. So 5 days out from the Jewel, which is our kind of biggest event, we cancelled that 5 days out from D-Day, and then spiraled into I don't know what it was, a pit of despair and just craziness. Yeah.
That lasted from March 16 right through to now?
Our first event back was June the 28th. Rings a bell. So what's that? That sounds like maybe 3.5 months.
And you had to cancel 7 events?
Yeah, we cancelled 7 events through that time.
Okay.
Including a couple of events that, like, for example, we'd had, what became really interesting was just the spin that, like, our partners, for example, had on the COVID thing. We cancelled one that we could have put on. It was actually meant to be this month, but because we were working with a multinational brand, they just wanted so risk averse, didn't want any involvement. So yeah, the net result for us was cancelling a third of our portfolio of events. So March through June, again, watching that revenue fall was crazy. Like, we went in the first month, and it was sort of based on year on year. We always look at year on year comparisons. We dropped to below 100% of the revenue that we made in the same time the year prior, with things like refunds and stuff. Like, it was madness. It was crazy from a business perspective.
How close did you come to, pulling the plug, or did it get bad? Did it get that bad at any stage?
It didn't. And what's super interesting and ridiculously frightening is that so because of the nature of the business, we couldn't afford to make cash refunds for events, because you sink a lot of cost into events, from the outset, things like staffing and marketing and all those things. So we kind of implemented this credit-based system. So we ended up issuing several $100,000 worth of credits to people that didn't do the events. And we're not really going to understand the impact of that from a financial perspective until those events open. We just opened a bunch of them on Monday, actually. And so I don't know, and no one really knows how to plan for that. So we got through this year. We will get through this year okay. Things like the wage subsidy really, really helped us. It would have been entirely different if we weren't able to tap into that. Like, it was kind of the difference between us being able to carry on and not.
Yeah.
And pretty quickly into COVID, my one thing, my one goal was to retain everyone that worked for us.
Mm-hmm.
So that became the thing that gave me my kind of single focus through that first lockdown was doing that. And to date so far, everyone's still here. There's 12 people that work for Total Sport these days.
Wow. But obviously, the next 6 months in particular are crucial to you guys. You can't afford another lockdown or any more cancelled events, I would imagine.
I don't. Yeah, I don't think. I don't think that it's sustainable to do what we've done again next year.
Mm-hmm.
Like we got such an amazing response from the community that's been developed over the last few years. Like some of the emails and the support messages we got from people were, to be honest, completely humbling and
Mm.
part of what probably got us through. People saying things like, all we actually care about is you guys being here. Once we get through all of this, we thank you for your credit,
Mm.
but you can be absolutely sure that we're not going to use it. Um, so like stuff like that was just like, oh my God, people really care about this stuff, and they care about this. And I guess what I try and tell to my team, it's a really bizarre position to be in through those sorts of times is, well, I'm secretly having a mental breakdown and hitting rock bottom. You're trying to kind of put on a brave face and
Mm.
keep it all positive. And so
Mm.
I was telling my guys, I'm like, man, I think this is called brand equity. I think this is what we've been building up for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
People,
Yeah.
we're good people doing good stuff, and there's clearly a lot of really amazing people out there who get it and who just want to support us. So
So how is your exit strategy looking now?
it died.
Okay. One of the casualties of COVID.
Yeah, so it
Yeah.
actually got to the point like I was on 3 days a week at
Mm.
the start of this year, and
Mm.
I created this other opportunity where I was starting a trust, and that trust was all about was called the Outdoors for Good Trust, and that purpose of that whole thing was working with people that had faced and are facing adversity, and basically trying to educate them around the benefits of being outdoors and creating opportunities to get outdoors. So I had some natural synergies with Total Sport, and the plan was that Total Sport was going to pledge a percentage of revenue to this trust to give it a revenue stream. I became the executive director of that trust, salaried. So I'd gone and pitched this opportunity to someone, and they'd gone for it. So I was actually down to 3 days a week.
Mm.
I was only doing a number of things. I was doing kind of strategy and finance and new business was really what I was doing at Total Sport, doing
Yeah.
zero operational stuff. And then I basically had to quit that position, or chose to quit that position on the trust, because it was just not the time to take the eye
Mm.
off the prize, I guess. So got back into Total Sport boots and all. But I was at that point, heading into this year, prepared to sell more shares and become a lot less involved, and ultimately probably just become someone that sat on the board and help to steer the direction of the business, but kind of start to remove myself. I just felt that 20 years is a long time to do things, and I just didn't want to be the guy sitting in the corner making bad decisions. And so it was kind of a little bit about being able to set up and kind of leave on my own terms, knowing that
Sure.
there were people really capable of driving the business forward. But for now, that's fallen
On
over.
hold. On hold for now.
Yeah.
Aaron, listen, thanks so much. Just to finish, if you could rewind 20 odd years to that young fella who invested 20 grand into a new company called Total Sport, what advice would you give him?
Oh, I think it's I think we got to the right place, but you've got to start with a plan. You probably go and watch some of Simon Sinek's TEDx talks. The one that pops out for me is to start with why. Go
Yeah.
go watch that 3 or 4 times. Read some books. Talk to some people. Gather people around you, because what I've learned is there's a lot of people out there who don't need or want to be paid, who have got skills and expertise and passion that they'd love to share. And then just surround yourself with those people. Put together a plan. It doesn't have to be super big. I'm a firm believer that less is more when it comes to this kind of stuff. But get clear around purpose. and then purpose and people, driven by passion. I think are the three P's for me. That if you get them sorted early, you're definitely heading in the right direction, I think.
Magic. Listen, thanks so much, Aaron. Been a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thanks for having me.
Happy trails. Go well.
And you too.